What truly evokes a deep, visceral revulsion in you. Not just a fleeting dislike, but a profound, irrational aversion. Something you're ready to condemn and banish from your world, from your very thoughts, as the embodiment of absolute evil. Perhaps it's a specific character trait manifested in another, or a phenomenon that challenges your fundamental understanding of the world order. Gaze into this pole of irritation, this epicenter of your inner rebellion. Imagine that this pole, this concentration of darkness that you so fiercely reject, is not in fact an alien body in the universe, but merely a distorted echo, a resonance of something dormant in the deepest corners of your own soul. For what we so vehemently brand as absolute evil, as a devilish entity, is often nothing more than the extreme point of the collective and individual shadow, a concentration of everything we have ever banished from our own consciousness, turned away from with disgust, shame, or fear. It is something that proved so unbearable, so not me, that it was exiled internally, becoming an inner exile. Hidden within this furious reaction, this almost physical repulsion, is a colossal, untapped power, a power capable of either destroying you if you continue to flee its echoes, or becoming the key to an unprecedented fullness of being if you dare to turn and face it. This is not just a negative emotion. It is a potent, energetic charge that, when unconscious, controls you from the depths, shaping your boundaries, your fears, your prohibitions. It defines what you consider possible and impossible for yourself. When and at what moment in your life did you first feel this suffocating burden of rejection, this cold dread before what you now call absolute evil? What seed was sown in the soil of your soul to cultivate such powerful repulsion, such categorical banishment? We've discussed that deep, irrational revulsion, that primal shudder before what we've labeled absolute evil. This, paradoxically, is not an alien entity, but a concentrated echo, a distorted reflection of our own unacknowledged depths. Within this furious rejection, this bitter antipathy, lies a colossal, untapped power. But when did this process originate? When were the first seeds of this internal exile sown in your own psyche? Recall, if you dare, the dawn of your conscious self, those fragile years when the world was a blank canvas of unbridled experiences, not yet burdened by judgment. And yet, even then, an invisible chisel of expectations began its work. Subtle, sometimes unspoken codes of family, tribe, and society began to delineate the boundaries of what was permissible, defining what was good, what was right. And anything that dared to step beyond these barely drawn limits was branded, not always with a loud reprimand, but often with a look, a silence, a barely perceptible withdrawal. Listen to those first sparks of your being, those vital energies that, though unbridled, might have seemed chaotic, but carried the very essence of your potential. Perhaps it was awakening ambition, that primal urge to assert, to achieve, to claim one's rightful place in the sun. How quickly was it labeled selfishness, greed, excess, or healthy, fiery aggression, the instinctive drive to protect one's boundaries, to say no, to stand firm in the face of intrusion? How swiftly did it transform into rudeness, malice, unacceptable anger, forcing you to suppress the very impulse to defend your sacred space? And what about the magnificent, messy right to make mistakes, to stumble, to learn through imperfection? Was it not met with the chilling gaze of disappointment, the silent demand for unattainable perfection? How many times did a simple act of genuine vulnerability, of opening the heart to the unpredictable currents of connection, become a source of deep shame, a perceived weakness that had to be meticulously hidden? Each time these authentic impulses, the desire to achieve, the strength to assert, the freedom to err, the courage to feel, encountered disapproval with a subtle or overt message that they were bad, shameful, dangerous. A part of you was quietly, methodically exiled. These were the first inner exiles, banished not to distant lands, but to the forgotten chambers of your own soul. They were deemed unworthy of light, too destructive, too raw for the carefully constructed facade of the good self. And so they were locked away, these vitally important aspects, these magnificent energies, relegated to darkness, deprived of expression, but never truly extinguished. They don't decay there like dead things, but lurk as living, powerful forces, demanding recognition, awaiting their time to return. This internal exile, this self-inflicted amputation, is the very crucible in which the shadow of absolute evil begins to take its terrifying form. For what we refuse to acknowledge within ourselves, what we banish into external darkness, does not disappear. It merely waits, accumulating power, often to be projected onto the world as the very thing we fear and despise the most. We spoke of the shadow, that abyss within that contains all that is rejected, all that is undesirable, all that does not fit the refined contours of our conscious self. But how does this inner darkness, this invisible yet powerful aspect of the soul, manifest externally? How do the ghostly phantoms of our exiled qualities take on flesh in the world we call real, becoming objects of our irrational fear and disgust? Imagine an ancient tribe where every member must not only exist, but conform to strict, unwritten laws of survival and social harmony. Any impulse, any quality that threatens the integrity of the community, be it inappropriate aggression capable of disrupting internal peace, excessive vulnerability making us easy prey, insatiable greed, or even too bright, rebellious individuality that deviates from the norm, is immediately branded. It is not merely suppressed, not merely driven inward. It is exiled, not physically by banishment beyond the settlement, but metaphorically, from the circle of acceptability, from the field of consciousness, from the very concept of self. These exiled aspects, our inner exiles, do not disappear. They merely recede into the shadow, beyond visibility, into the psyche's underground, but their energy, their life force, does not vanish. It accumulates like the energy of an unpaid bill. Every time we turn away from our own shadow, every time we are ashamed of a natural impulse, every time we refuse to acknowledge something improper or bad within ourselves, interest accrues on this internal account. These interest payments are a hidden, latent power that cannot simply be annulled. It seeks an outlet, seeks recognition, seeks a way to return to the fullness of being, even if that recognition comes in the form of hatred or fear directed at the external world, at some external object. And so this unpaid bill is presented to the world. What we cannot accept in ourselves, cannot assimilate, cannot integrate into our personality, we project onto others with astonishing ease. This is a fundamental, almost instinctive mechanism of the psyche, allowing us to maintain the fragile illusion of our own integrity, purity and moral superiority, while the world around us seems increasingly filled with evil. We see in others what we refuse to see in ourselves. We brand others' flaws, vices, demonic traits, unaware that they are merely distorted mirror reflections of our own qualities, trapped in the dungeon of the soul of our own suppressed energy. Recall the archetypal myth of Frankenstein. And here it's not so much about the created creature as about its creator, Victor Frankenstein. Obsessed with the audacious dream of creating life, of going beyond the permissible, he assembles his creation from parts that were rejected, from what society considers dead, insignificant, useless. He invests in it his genius, his ambition, his insatiable thirst for knowledge and power over nature. But when the creature comes to life, when it appears before him in its physical reality, Victor cannot accept it. He rejects his progeny, horrified by its appearance, its monstrosity, forgetting that he himself breathed the spark of life into it, that this creation is flesh of his own flesh, of his boldest and most forbidden aspirations. And this rejected creature, this monster, becomes the embodiment of all society's fears and prejudices, as well as a direct projection of Victor's own guilt, horror, and disgust. The creature, initially not evil, merely naive and yearning for love, transforms into a monster due to total non-acceptance, due to banishment from the human tribe, due to the denial of its right to exist. It becomes a living, breathing symbol of what happens when we refuse to take responsibility for our creations, for our rejected, suppressed aspects. It is a metaphor for that very energy of the unpaid bill that, when rejected, turns against its creator. This is precisely how our inner exiles, these once living parts of our soul, take on external forms, embodying themselves in those figures, those archetypes, those types of people who evoke in us the most irrational repulsion, the deepest, most inexplicable hatred, the most burning contempt. They become those whom we so readily call the devil, evil incarnate, a monster, unaware that at that moment we are merely looking into a distorted mirror of our own unacknowledged power, our own rejected potential. For these external images are not accidental. If a person were a blank slate, unmarred by fear, shame, or the pressures of the world, then the monsters that roam their mental landscapes would not exist. But we are not a blank slate. We are a complex tapestry of light and shadow, and what we banish from our inner city inevitably takes form externally, becoming the very faces that evoke in us irrational, deep disgust. It is not merely a dislike for another's imperfection. It is an echo, a resonance with our own inner exile, that part of us that was rejected and banished to the subconscious. Allow me to outline a couple of such demons that whisper of our own shadow. The first is the Titan of Ruthless Success. You know him. He's always at the top, always in the spotlight. His ambitions know no bounds, and his methods often disregard the fine lines of morality. He steps over others, appropriates their ideas. His speech is full of self-confidence, bordering on arrogance, and his gaze on cold calculation. In his presence, not just irritation, but a burning, almost personal indignation arises within us. Why? Because this Titan is a distorted mirror of our own cornered ambition. We hate in him the part of ourselves that craves recognition, power, and success at any cost, but which we have reined in, branded as improper or selfish. We have banished it from our consciousness, and now it manifests externally, provoking anger and contempt in us towards the bearer of this shameful power. Or take another, the eternal victim, the hidden manipulator. He is always in a state of victimhood, always unhappy, always burdened by the world's injustice. His words are complaints, his actions passive aggression, his existence a constant demand for attention and sympathy, often achieved through guilt he skillfully imposes on others. Next to him, we feel drained, exhausted. We experience an irrational desire to flee and sometimes even to choke him, just to stop this endless stream of whining. What is the reason for such sharp rejection? In him, we see the part of us that fears responsibility, that craves unquestioning care and attention, that wants to be weak without bearing the consequences of that weakness. We have banished our right to vulnerability, to irresponsibility, to simple human needs, fearing to be a burden or appear weak. And now, when the eternal victim demonstrates this, without shame, he becomes for us the embodiment of everything we have suppressed within ourselves. Let me give an example of one such instance that is forever etched in my memory. In my youth, there was a person, let's call him Arthur. He was a classmate of mine, and at first glance, unremarkable. But the moment Arthur started talking about his successes, about the brilliance of his ideas, about how easily he completed projects that others struggled with for months, a strange, irrational fire would ignite in my chest. Not envy, not exactly. It was more a deep, almost physical revulsion at his blatant self-importance, at his ability to claim others' merits, at his shameless confidence in his own exceptionalism. He could be late for a project defense, show up unprepared, yet parry committee questions with such aplomb that he emerged victorious, while I, who had meticulously prepared, felt unnoticed. My inner world protested against his existence, against the very possibility of such behavior. I didn't understand why his transgressions seemed 100 times worse to me than similar mistakes made by others. This irrational hatred for Arthur, for his permissiveness and audacity, was so strong that it poisoned my days. I saw in him the embodiment of everything worst in a human being: selfishness, unscrupulousness, lack of conscience. But Arthur was merely a mirror of my own, deeply hidden and suppressed ambition, my desire to stand out, to be first, to gain recognition. I had banished these impulses to the darkest room of my soul because I believed that being like that was bad, immodest, unworthy. Arthur, unbeknownst to him, became the living embodiment of my inner exile. That part of me that wished to be as daring and fearless in achieving its goals, but was chained by upbringing and the fear of judgment. His success was not merely an injustice to me, but a painful reminder of my own unrealized, forbidden power. He was my personal demon, born of my own shadow. And so we stand before these faces, the external manifestations of our internal exiles. We see monsters in them, but what if these frightening images are not just shadows, but guardians of the very gold that we so hastily threw beyond the walls of consciousness, frightened by its true power? We spoke of those phantoms that, like shadows on a cave wall, frighten us with their distorted form, of those demons whose presence causes irrational repulsion, for they seem to embody everything we have rejected within ourselves. But what if these frightening images are merely masks beneath which something else is hidden? What if the most repulsive of exiles actually holds the brightest light in its dungeon? Imagine that every vice, every flaw that we so zealously banished into the depths of our unconscious was once a pure, unclouded source of strength. This is our right to manifest our innate ability, our unique gift, our innermost self, which we at times buried ourselves fearing its true power or the harsh judgment of the world. And now this treasure, deprived of the sunlight of recognition, has deformed, acquired ugly features, but has not disappeared. It waits, imprisoned in its exile, to be rediscovered and transformed. Take, for example, the one we've labeled the Titan of Ruthless Success. At first glance, he embodies egocentric ambition, a blind thirst for power, ready to walk over others. He evokes a deep-seated revulsion in us, because in our youth, perhaps we were taught that standing out is bad, that wanting too much is a sin, and that success should be modest and inconspicuous. We suppress the natural, life-giving impulse to grow, to manifest ourselves outwardly, to create and influence. Yet it is precisely this impulse, not ruthless ambition, but healthy ambition, pure will to act, the right to realize one's potential, that is the gold hidden behind the Titan's mask. This is energy capable of moving mountains, embodying the boldest dreams, leading others not by destroying, but by inspiring. It is the right to be seen, to be the leader of your life, to be a creator, not a passive observer. By exiling this energy, we condemn ourselves to inaction, to fear of our own potential, to a life devoid of true scale and daring. Or consider the eternal victim. His endless complaints and displays of pain can cause irritation, a desire to distance ourselves. We learn to be strong, not to show weakness, not to burden others with our experiences. We locked away our vulnerability in the dungeon of our exile, not as weakness, but as a portal to deep humanity and true intimacy. Beneath the victim's mask lies the right to pain, the right to empathy, the capacity for deep compassion, both for oneself and for others. This is not a manipulative demand for attention, but a sincere, authentic desire to be seen in one's fragility, to be understood, to be supported. It is the ability to open one's heart, to bare one's soul, to create true healing intimacy, for it is in our vulnerability that we are most authentic. By rejecting this part, we became rigid, closed off, depriving ourselves of depth of experience and genuine connection with the world, condemning ourselves to loneliness within a shining but cold armor of invulnerability. Even the one I once called Arthur, who embodied unbearable self-importance for me, was merely a distorted reflection. Behind his ostentatious arrogance lay something else, not the right to humiliate others, but the right to shine, the right to be seen, the right to healthy self-esteem and unwavering confidence in one's abilities. We often suppress this right within ourselves, fearing to be judged for pride or egoism, but true confidence is not arrogance, but a deep inner knowledge of one's worth, acceptance of one's talents, and a readiness to present them to the world. It is not vanity, but the ability to stand one's ground, to believe in oneself without needing constant external approval. By exiling this, we condemn ourselves to eternal doubts, to an inability to assert ourselves, to a life in the shadow of others. Expectations, silencing our unique voice, our unparalleled calling. Each of these exiles is not a curse, but a message. It carries something invaluable that was rejected but not destroyed. This is not a call to become a ruthless tyrant or an eternal whiner, but an invitation to alchemical transformation, to reclaim the right to power, to vulnerability, to self-worth, by purifying purifying them of distortions. The truth is, these demons don't just guard our gold. They actively influence our lives, sabotaging us precisely in those areas where we are afraid to manifest these forbidden qualities, preventing us from moving forward until we dare to look them in the eye and reclaim what is ours. This is a path where encountering them becomes not an avoidance, but a necessity. At times when we stand at a crossroads, an inner voice, our inner exile, whispers, "Anything but that, just don't become like them." And this whisper, woven from the fear of resembling those demons we have banished from our own consciousness, becomes an invisible chain shackling our boldest impulses, sabotaging decisions that could change our destiny. We are afraid to touch the energy that seems to us to be absolute evil, not understanding it is merely a distorted echo of our own unacknowledged power. Recall the Titan of Ruthless Success, the one who evokes irrational revulsion in us with his self-confidence, his ability to take what's his without looking back. If deep down we have exiled our own healthy ambition, the right to leadership, the right to demand fair pay for our work, then our inner exile will fiercely protect us from any manifestation of these qualities. We will subconsciously reject profitable offers just to avoid being like him. We will avoid salary negotiations, fearing to appear greedy. We will shy away from leadership positions, fearing to become a despot. This self-censorship, this refusal of our own power leads to stagnation, to a feeling of unfulfillment, to the bitter taste of missed opportunities. We ourselves deprive ourselves of what could bring prosperity just to avoid confronting our own suppressed titanic energy. Or take the eternal victim, the hidden manipulator, the one who constantly appears to be a victim of circumstances, yet skillfully weaves webs, making those around them dance to their tune. If we have exiled from ourselves the right to vulnerability, to sincerity, to direct expression of our needs, fearing to be used or manipulated, then our inner exile will stubbornly keep us trapped in the role of the accommodating person. We won't be able to say no because it will be perceived as selfishness, the shadow of an exiled desire to assert our boundaries. We will take on others' responsibilities just to avoid being like him who uses others. And in the end, exhausted, we ourselves become the victim we so desperately fled from, or unconsciously begin to manipulate through passive aggression to get what we want, but without a direct request. This is a vicious cycle of suffering born from the fear of becoming what we despise. What if this exile, this rejected part, is our own ability to shine, to be noticed, to be recognized? How often do we hide our talents, diminish our achievements, avoid public speaking or expressing unique ideas just to avoid appearing arrogant or presumptuous? Like that classmate Arthur, whose self-confidence once irritated us so much. The fear of being like him paralyzes our ability to assert ourselves, to express our individuality. We fear that our light will seem dazzling to someone, and our confidence, audacity. As a result, our ideas remain unexpressed, our potential unrealized, and we ourselves invisible. It is not external forces that sabotage us, but our own internal guardian, who in striving to protect us from the imaginary danger of becoming a demon, deprives us of vital energy and true fulfillment. And here arises the inevitable question, heavy as a stone in hand, must I, to gain strength, become what I despise? Does the path to wholeness lie through resembling a monster? No, this is a profound misconception. It is not about becoming a ruthless tyrant or a hidden manipulator. It is about recognizing and reclaiming that original, pure energy, ambition, will to power, right to self-expression, healthy aggression, ability to set boundaries, which was imprisoned by fear and projections. It is energy that, when exiled, became deformed and manifests in a distorted form. Our task is not to embrace the monster, but to extract the gold from it, to realize that beneath the layer of repulsive manifestations lies something vitally important and necessary for our wholeness. But the shadow not only takes away, it not only holds us captive in fear of who we don't want to be, it also conceals something entirely different, no less valuable, something we voluntarily give to others, unaware that it is our own treasure, locked in a golden prison. We spoke of mirrors of disgust, of exiling those parts of the soul that frighten us or don't fit into what's generally accepted. But the shadow is not only an abyss of rejection, it also holds treasures we voluntarily entrust to others, those specks of gold that we, blinded by another's brilliance, hasten to attribute exclusively to the external world. This is a phenomenon Jung called the golden shadow, a shadow woven not from fear but from admiration. If the black shadow is what we hate in others, unwilling to accept in ourselves, then the golden shadow is what we praise boundlessly, disbelieving the possibility of finding it within ourselves. Within each of us lives an invisible altar on which we elevate our idols. These aren't necessarily media stars. It could be a friend whose ease of communication seems unattainable, a mentor whose wisdom astounds, a character in a novel whose courage makes our heart ache with envy. We see their brilliance, their talent, their uniqueness, and instead of recognizing in it a reflection of our own potential, we sever that part of ourselves, projecting it outward. We convince ourselves that's their gift, their charisma, their genius. I'm not capable of that. It is precisely here that insidious sabotage lies. By projecting admiration, we are not just admiring, we are relinquishing our own treasures. We voluntarily surrender to another person our unrealized courage, dormant creativity, unheard intuition, leadership ability, our inner light. These qualities, in essence, become our inner exiles, but not because they are bad, but because we gave them to someone else. They remain in the shadow, not because we fear them, but because we deify them outside ourselves, thereby depriving ourselves of the right to possess them. Imagine within you lives a brilliant artist, but you've convinced yourself that all colors belong only to Picasso, or a great orator whose words could ignite hearts, yet you whisper that the true gift of eloquence belongs to Churchill. These internal exiles are locked in a prison of self-denial, their light projected onto an external screen. They await the moment you stop gazing at other stars and turn your gaze towards your own as yet hidden radiance. Every time we exclaim, "How I wish I were like them," we inadvertently strengthen the prison walls around these exiled golden qualities. We deprive ourselves of the energy to manifest these traits, for their source, we believe, lies outside us. This act of self-denial, this transference of responsibility for our own uniqueness onto others' shoulders, is one of the deepest forms of self-sabotage. But what if this admiration is merely a map pointing to untold riches awaiting their hour in the depths of your own soul? If we dare to look into the abyss we spoke of, if we recognize in the guises of our demons the distorted reflections of our own exiles, then it is time not just to contemplate, but to act. It is time to reclaim what was rejected, what now wanders the back alleys of the soul, whispering of its resentment and longing for return. Meeting the absolute shadow is not a battle. It is an act of profound self-acceptance, an alchemical transformation of fear into strength, revulsion into awareness. It is a philosophy that calls for a radical reclaiming of power over one's own soul. We are prone to project, and there is nothing shameful in this, for it is a fundamental mechanism of the psyche. But therein also lies our vulnerability. We give away a part of ourselves outwardly, empowering others with this force, those we despise and those we adore. If the Titan of Jada Ruthless Success, or the eternal sufferer, hidden manipulator, caused irrational repulsion in us, it was only because in them we saw a distorted, frightening reflection of our own exiled ambitions, our right to vulnerability, our aggression, our fear of rejection. These demons are guardians of gold, and their repellent appearance is merely a mask designed to deter us from the treasure. But there is another form of projection, no less insidious, for it deprives us of light. The golden shadow, as we mentioned, occurs when we admire someone's talent, charisma, or wisdom, yet deny ourselves the right to possess these same qualities. We voluntarily give away our power, our potential, making ourselves poorer than we could be. In both cases, in hatred and in blind admiration, we lose ourselves, dissolving our wholeness in the mirages of the external world. The time has come to gather the fragments. The time has come to bring all internal exiles home. And the path to this lies through the conscious integration of projections. This does not mean you must become the evil you once despised or copy your idols. It means you must reclaim the energy, the right to those qualities that have been suppressed. I offer you a simple yet powerful exercise, which I call reclaiming your power. Perform it in a calm setting with an open heart and a readiness for honesty. Chapter 1. Identify the projection. Recall a person or phenomenon that evokes a strong, irrational aversion, anger, fear, or conversely excessive, almost unhealthy admiration in you. This could be someone in your circle, a public figure, or even an abstract idea that embodies absolute evil or absolute good for you. Chapter 2. Recognize the quality. Ask yourself, what quality, trait, impulse, or part of me does this person, phenomenon symbolize, but which I forbid myself to express or acknowledge? If it's aversion, perhaps it's suppressed ambition, aggression, the right to make mistakes, vulnerability, selfishness, or a need for recognition. If it's admiration, perhaps it's your own unrevealed talent, charisma, wisdom, courage, or capacity for love. 3. Visualize the exile. Imagine this quality as an internal exile. Perhaps it will be a figure, a color, a symbol, or even the very demon or angel onto whom you projected it. 4. Reclaim the energy. Mentally or aloud, address this image. Say to it, I see you. I acknowledge that you are a part of me. I reclaim my right to name the quality. For example, healthy ambition, the right to anger, the ability to be vulnerable, my talent, my wisdom. I take back the energy I gave to you. You are no longer my enemy, my idol. You are my integrated strength. 5. Feel the integration. Allow yourself to feel this energy returning to your body, into your soul. This might be warmth, tingling, a sense of wholeness, or lightness. Repeat this exercise with different projections. Each time you integrate a part of your shadow or golden shadow, you become more whole, more powerful. This is not just a mental exercise. It is a ritual of reclaiming your own sovereignty. Each returned exile weakens the power of the absolute shadow, for it feeds only on what remains unconscious and unaccepted. You cease to be a victim of your own projections and become their master, the alchemist of your soul. You do not fight the devil, you dissolve it, reclaiming its energy, its essence. And when all the exiles return home, when the shadow ceases to be a threat and becomes an ally, what then? What is the next step on the path to true wholeness? There exists another phase, no less profound, no less demanding, but shining with an entirely different light. It awaits us at the threshold of the next awareness, beyond the last veil of illusions.